on making remote work work with John Bernadovich, Willory's founder and president. You'll notice that myself and John are on video. Nobody else has to get on video, don't worry. And you are automatically muted, but if you have questions, please use the chat or email me, Bridget, that's BRIDGETTE, if I can spell my own name, at willory.com. So without further ado, introductions, as I mentioned, John is leading this webinar, and so I'll let him introduce himself. You're on mute.
I guess that's the first lesson to share. Mute button perfection is something that doesn't exist in a virtual work environment. So many of us struggle sometimes with making sure we're not on mute. So thank you, Bridget, for keeping me in mind of my mute situation. At the same time, I did want to just open up before introducing myself with a heartfelt thank you to everyone for taking the time out today. I know all schedules are incredibly busy and disruptive. We're unwinding plans. We're planning for something we weren't expecting days, weeks, month ago, and we are establishing a new normal for our work life, our personal life, and our own health and safety. So I would be remiss without sharing that. I also this is an unprecedented webinar for me personally. I played some Stan Kenton music as you were on hold, as I am facing end of life for my dad, who's in hospice care. So if you bear with me, I have done my absolute best to be prepared for today's webinar. We did pull this together very quickly because of the relevant topic, and I started my firm, Willory, in October of 2010, and I intentionally developed it to be 100% remote for our internal staff. I believed at the time that it was the future of work. I believed it was something I personally had wonderful experience with when I did it previously part-time at a prior employer. And I just felt like it was a way to transcend the business environment to a way that you can balance the personal needs of your family while being at times incredibly productive and other times incredibly distracted. But those distractions are usually wonderful ones that you aren't able necessarily to do when you are working in an office. Those distractions being your loved ones, your kids, your furry friends, the neighbor that comes over and knocks on the door to deliver you cookies or whatever the case might be. So we will certainly cover a wide array of topics today to get you, many of you that may not have been prepared for this transition, and give you some of the insights that we have done at Willory from day one and beyond to ensure that we have a productive workforce, that we keep people safe. Obviously, we have them connected, and that we leverage the culture that we've established within our firm. And so I will do my best to give you anecdotal and specific insights that will be helpful in a wide array. And I know we'll have a forum for communication on questions, which Bridget will facilitate. So that's a brief introduction of myself, and thank you for all taking the time to join me.
Yes, I want to echo John in saying thank you. I'm Bridget Klein. I am Willory's Director of Marketing, and I started working from home 5 years ago when I started working for Willory. And for me, it's definitely been a great opportunity to be there for my family while really getting to do a job that I love. So I know this is a unique circumstance that more people are working from home, but I do believe in its power to revolutionize the balance and the understanding between work and life. All right, so we want you guys to kind of participate. We know it's a webinar, so sometimes that can be a little hard or awkward to participate in, but we are using a chat stream on our LinkedIn, which is linkedin.com/company/Willory1. Willory1 is our handle on all platforms of social media we are on. And there you can kind of share tips or comments, and I'll try to incorporate those into the presentation. And as John's talking, ask him certain questions that have been asked by this group. And then also comment on that post if you want to connect with others. You know, there are some of us who've been working from home for a long time, and others, you guys are just getting used to this. So how can you truly connect and also understand that everyone's kind of going through this unique and unknown experience together? If you want to ask a question in the chat feature, you are very welcome to. It is on typically the side of the screen. I know everyone has Zoom set up just a little differently, but when you are doing that, please direct it to everyone so that we will make sure to see it. Or you can email Bridget@willory.com, and I spelled my name right on that screen, so I won't try and spell it out loud again. So our agenda today, we are breaking this up into two sections, one focused on employers. So looking at mobilizing remote work due to COVID-19, and what do you do now if you're just really getting started for that? Work from home tips for your staff, maintaining culture in a virtual environment, because it is a unique thing and it makes your culture very different, whether that virtual environment is temporary or permanent. How do you manage from a distance? And that was something that was unique for me as I became a manager in Willory. It's a different experience. And then the second half of our webinar is really focused on employees. So what do you do now that you're working from home, maybe unexpectedly, setting up your virtual office? The next part is, how do you deal with kids who are now home from school? Next, we have just the overall distractions. I mean, we're all used to maybe our coworkers being distractions, but it's very different when it's a roommate, a spouse, a pet, someone, that is typically, there's a distance there. Maintaining culture in a virtual environment, and then how do you handle being managed from a distance? John, do you have anything you'd like to add on the agenda?
No, thank you, Bridget. I'm looking forward to covering all those topics, as well as any of the questions that anyone on the webinar has. So let's get started. All right, for the sake of employers, we're going to start with mobilizing remote work due to COVID-19. So but before I get into this, this is obviously unprecedented time, significant global concern over the spread of the coronavirus. In addition to that, government mandates shutting down schools and colleges and restaurants and bars, and additional group gatherings that we've seen even as low as 10, and in other countries around the world, home confinement, like in Italy, that we're seeing. So to me, as I learned of and studied and evaluated COVID-19 and its potential impact, not only on our safety, and understood as best I could all the news we were getting over the last few months, it really became evident to me that my primary focus was to ensure the safety was first and foremost amongst all the major disruptions that were going to take place. And in doing the things that the governor and other state and federal agencies are doing is around ensuring that safety around a new virus that we don't have a ton of knowledge on. We know it is highly more potentially impactful from a death perspective to what it was originally compared to of the flu, as well as just radical ways that we may not be used to, like social distancing, to be able to combat it. And obviously, I think there's been a very rightful consideration for everyone to have appropriate sanitation with your own well-being and hygiene. So washing your hands, coughing into your elbow. I've now seen the fist pump has been replaced by the foot tap, and a number of other things that are going to cascade throughout our community for a long time, because this has been such a profound impact, such a unique time, one that feels like other major monumental times in the history of our country. In addition to that, it's a rare combination to me of fear, change, and the unknown, which is a recipe to elevate everyone's stress and anxiety. Fear and the unknown is a significant factor, and then change for human beings is also significantly a contributor to people feeling unsettled and concerned. And as a result, millions of Americans, as well as our citizens across the globe, have been relocated back to work in a non-traditional office setting and to doing it from their home. And my first suggestion to everyone is to realize the stress that you feel is part of the adjustment to not only the fear and concern of COVID-19, but also managing through this new normal in your home setting that may also include furry friends, children, spouses, and other family members. So making this type of change takes time, right? In an ideal sense, we would have had plenty of time to prepare for mobilizing our workforce in a remote environment. My sense is that many of you that are on this call are still trying to figure out that game plan. Maybe you haven't been able to mobilize your entire workforce because your business climate doesn't necessarily allow for it. And many of those mobile work transitions take months and years to take place, not necessarily hours and days, which is what we're embracing upon. So to me, besides the safety concern of what COVID-19 could do to our healthcare system and people's well-being, what I find to be the most challenging thing is the fact that we're unwinding so many plans that we had scheduled for, end of Q1, beginning of Q2, to where we're in this mode of mobilizing a workforce to get them all to be able to have a safe social distance and be able to complete some of the work requirements that we need to have done as a part of that. So to me, certain jobs in the midst of it cannot be done remotely. And they require you to take great care and thought. I've seen most recently the largest, most well-known employer in our country, Amazon, is daily updating about how they're handling a bunch of their staff members and employees and team members within their warehouse facilities to be able to deliver products to Americans and beyond during this unique time. And I just recently saw that they are now diminishing that down to essential items. So minimizing anything that maybe not necessarily is deemed as non-essential. So the pace that we're having to make decisions on, to me, in this regard, is staggering, right? The pace that we're having to do this. So first and foremost, as it relates to mobilizing your remote workforces, we've got to review the essential job duties that someone is necessarily required to do in that, and can those items be done remotely? So can the actual tasks that are at hand be necessarily done in a remote environment? So Bridget, if you can keep scrolling ahead, because you got control of there you go. So if the job can be done remotely, then are you able to create the technology and the infrastructure to be able to do that in a way that makes that employee more productive in a home environment than not doing anything at all? So I'll have more to come on the tech part, because to me, as I contemplated and put together the slide deck for today, the technology aspect was paramount for us to be able to do this in a way that was successful and scalable for our staff. And some of you may be struggling with some more antiquated or server-based or only available on your traditional corporate office or in-home, or not in-home, but at your office technology. And so kind of working around that and trying to find the limitations that may cause our pretty paramount at this time. In addition to that, being mindful of the security that goes into accessing key information within your company. We see things now, traditional old technology around VPN, also now some more enhanced technology, pretty commonplace with what we call multi-factor authentication to ensure that if I'm getting on a laptop, on a Wi-Fi that's out of the normal course that you're coming into your tech, that you have another validation that it is actually me. So if you haven't had some of those multi-factor authentication tools, they are available and increase the security level that you would have. In addition to that, we have to be mindful of your people, right? So this is a tough one to describe, because as I get into culture, ideally, right, in an ideal sense, we would have had all this figured out in advance, and then we would have been able to hire people that fit into a work remote environment. And I will very graciously tell a story about my interview with Bridget when she interviewed for our marketing associate role over 5 years ago. And part of the interviewing process was I pretty much grilled her on her comfort and reasons why working in a remote environment were of appeal to her, because many of the other applicants that applied for that job were recently right out of college, not too dissimilar to Bridget, and they wanted extensive socialization in their job. And the fact of them not being able to be around people every day became an automatic red flag for them to consider Willory as an employer. So luckily for us, it worked right for Willory and for Bridget. And 5+ years later, she, as you can tell, is doing a much better job in branding Willory than I am. You can tell I'm an avid Browns fan, so that's the backdrop of my office. So you have to assess each person. So what I would suggest that you do in that regard is to realize and be just very specific about each of the people that you've put out into a remote environment. And if they were not prepared for this a week ago, I would encourage you to evaluate them in their ability to work autonomously in a disciplined way with self-inflicted structure. Because in a remote environment and under the confines we are around social distancing, you as their manager can, and or the people that are managing them, can't come into their home, and they can't sit over their shoulder and make sure that the work is being done. So you certainly need to ensure that that individual is capable and able. Yes, Bridget.
I was going to say, I think working virtually can understandably exacerbate some issues that employees have. So if they have an issue staying on topic and not getting distracted at work, you should be mindful that that is likely going to happen in a different capacity when they are at home. Now, the inverse can be true if you have someone who might be overtly social and gets distracted by the people element of an office. When they're in their own environment, there is that you remove some of that distraction. So understanding where people struggle in an office and thinking about how to combat that when they are virtual, I think is a great place to also be mindful of.
Thank you, Bridget. And I'll just share my story, what drove me to this. I worked at a large outsourced payroll servicing company named ADP for about 10 years. In the last few years in that job, they started to offer the sales professionals the ability to work partially remote. And it took me a while to adjust. I was actually less productive at home than I was in the office because I grew up just working in an office and having that discipline. But over time, I became more productive. And then I joined a boutique search firm of which we were, we did executive level search. And I did that for about 4 years. And about 6 months before I left that firm, my wife and I had our second child, Mallory. And I decided to take a month off of going into the office And my first priority was to take care of my wife and make sure that she was well and support her, as she obviously went through all that she did in giving birth to Mallory. My second priority was to make sure that my son did not throw his new daughter, or his new sister, Mallory, into the trash, which was threatened a couple times, and encouraged to leave her at home while we went other places. So I balanced that for a week or two, kind of adjusting to having a second kid at home. And then when I got back to working, I found it incredibly, there was a freedom that I felt by working from home, that I didn't have some of the distractions that came with socializing at work. And I could really focus on getting the work I needed to get done, and then have the ability to then go change a diaper, console my wife, provide the type of insight and support that a father could with a new baby at home. So I then went back to work in a traditional sense, and a few months later just felt right for me to start Willory. And in doing so, I said, I want to be able to set up my work environment in that regard, so that I could, as I said before, have the best of both worlds. I could be productive at work, start a unique, what I thought at the time, business opportunity, and also be able to, if my son's out in the backyard, I can see him riding his bike. And if I have 5 minutes to do it, I can stop what I'm doing and run out there and have 5 minutes of time with him. So, so that's certainly, so assessing your people, I guess if you get one main thing out of this slide, because I'm going to go on the technology part into detail, because I thought that was important, but just take a roll call of the people you have that have been put into a work environment that's remote. Create a kind of skill assessment of them that says, do they have the general discipline? Do they do well in structure? Do they work well autonomously? Will they struggle with the social distance? One of the biggest things that I see in this is that people can get lonely. They can feel isolated, and they can feel like they can't get away from their work because their work is their home. And we have to find a way to balance that. So then as far as mobilizing your remote workforce, home-based infrastructure, which should ideally cover a number of items that are both quiet and setting up somebody to be as productive as they possibly can. With the current situation that we're in, where we might have an additional spouse member doing the same, and then kids off work. I know our children just today started their virtual training or schoolwork that their school had, and it was about 3 hours of collaboration and learning, including some physical education, which I took a part in with the kids. So as we move on, Bridget, I want to talk a little bit more now specifically about the technology. So obviously, your laptop is a critically important part of getting things set up. We do also have dual monitors at our company. It does allow, at least in our opinion, greater and better access for you to gain insight into that. We also then would have telephony that you have to have built and structured. So curious to see if your VoIP provider, if you have that internally within your office setting, can translate that to a virtual sense. I'll be perfectly candid with you. We have struggled with this aspect of it. We evaluated a number of VoIP providers, and frankly, we're going to be moving away from the VoIP provider that we're using today and going primarily to cell phone, because we leveraged the technology, it integrated with our CRM. It did not work as well as we thought. The call quality was poor, and people then just ended up reserving or going back to using their cell phone. So if you have an effective VoIP system that works, then fantastic. If not, hopefully cell phones are readily available to your staff. Next on the list is cloud-based business systems. And I don't necessarily want to plug any one in particular, but I will in a moment. Having cloud-based technology for us is an absolute necessity. We have no server-based tech within our firm. The only traditional, what I might call, it's not even server-based, we have laptops, right? and then laptops, they become the ability for you to access through obviously Wi-Fi and secure internet to these business systems. So those business systems can include things like your human resource and payroll application, your CRM, your accounting and finance tools, maybe a marketing automation system. We also use something called Smart Sheets, which is basically a collaboration tool for projects that we can then all leverage that in a web-based platform. The only downside to this is if you lose the internet, then you in essence lose your ability to connect to those tools. So we have also for key staff members provided them with what's called MiFis, which is through, let's say, Verizon or Sprint or major telephony carriers. They have a virtual Wi-Fi system that you can take with you. So it's highly secure. When they sold it to me on the decision making, they said it was, you know, defense military grade security on the access point. It's not quite as fast as traditional Wi-Fi's, but it is certainly capable. So having cloud-based systems is paramount. If you don't have them, then I'm assuming right now you're probably working feverishly with your IT department to be able to find a way to mobilize some of the non-cloud-based tech in a virtual environment. So after making sure you have the right cloud-based systems, here's where I'm going to give a plug to one particular level of technology. Some of you may have this. I assume most do. That's at least been my experience. About 7 years ago, if not longer, we were one of our IT service providers' first clients to go on to a full Microsoft cloud-based Office 365 platform. So we've been running on Microsoft Office 365, I believe, since 2013, in which we have full access to all the Microsoft suite and beyond. Their tech around PowerPoint and Word documents and Excel and SharePoint and OneDrive, and now their new kind of rebranded version of Skype, which is Teams, which is a collaboration tool that can be used to help you collaborate with your group. So and then finally, this video conferencing is paramountly important because especially now, one of the key aspects of having success in a virtual environment is to be able to socialize with your colleagues. And we have forced, at least in the past, had at least an every other month meeting as a group for our team to socialize. And because they don't see each other often, I feel like I am the school teacher at the high school reunion to get everybody back in order so that we can actually have a business meeting because there's a ton of socialization going on. We can't do this now, right? This is a different time. So I'd recommend leveraging some form of video conferencing. We're obviously on Zoom right now. Again, I'm not trying to plug, I'm not getting paid by Microsoft Office 365, but we have found Zoom to be the most reliable video conferencing tool that's available. I did just see that the CEO of Zoom is offering free Zoom capabilities to schools and colleges, which I thought was really, really unique. There's a bunch of them out there. There's Uber, there's GoToMeeting, there's a wide array. Again, leverage them to the best of your ability.
Yeah, we've used
Yes,
Uber Conference is one that we've used, and they just recently added some video options, obviously using Teams or Skype. And then another good point about video conferencing is for those people that you're not entirely trusting to be as present as you expect them to be. And it adds a layer of accountability. You can see them, you can see if they're paying attention or if they're trying to do something else.
All right, and then I did mention multi-factor authentication. It's just a way to know that who's logging onto your laptop is actually that person. So it integrates typically the office tools with your telephone app to be able to verify that it's you. So as we continue on in mobilizing, once they're actually set up virtually, one of the most important things that we need to do is to create structure. We have at Willory very structured based schedules for our different departments and interdepartment meetings. So make sure that there's a schedule that's established, that their managers have consistent check-in, that you do have department or team meetings. I also would recommend that your CEO provide firm-wide communication, at least on a weekly basis. That's what we do as a firm to make sure that you keep people feeling connected. I have been over-communicating to my team over the last week or so, just to keep them abreast of what I'm seeing, good and bad, in our business and with the corona outbreak scare and what we're doing about it. I believe this creates routine, and it gives them a chance to check in on a consistent basis. Next is collaboration. You say that, oh gosh, how am I going to collaborate if I can't walk into Steve's office and sit down and have an in-depth conversation? That's where the video tool can become incredibly powerful. You can see people's facial expressions. You can get a sense that they're not paying attention, which is a very common thing during conference calls. For all of us that have been on that, you've been on mute, you've not been paying attention, you get called out and you start talking and you're still on mute and you're making stuff up. So being able to see people's eyes, their body language, and collaborating in that way is incredibly important. And we also recommend, again, not a selfless plug for Microsoft Office, but also a chance for chatting socially through instant messaging or what might be called more digital-based texting. So, and then the other key point is accountability. So part of the concern, and I'll never forget talking with many of you that may know the former president of ERC, Pat Perry. He marveled at the fact that we had this business. How do you do that? How do you make sure people are able to do the things they're supposed to be doing, or at least you've set the expectation to that? So we make sure that we have clearly defined metrics, that everybody understands in their role what makes a successful day, week, and month. We have an automated way to report that. We use, again, cloud-based dashboards to provide insight into the success that the company is having and that individual employee is having. And in those dashboards, we set appropriate timelines and deadlines to make sure that things are getting completed from an accountability standpoint. And then as far as the work site, I would definitely recommend that if someone is struggling, that you review their work-based home office work site. Make sure it's quiet, well lit, and organized. So now as we transition into your staff, a couple key points that I want to focus on working from home for your staff members. First is, please encourage them that they don't need to be working all the time. One of the most interesting things that happens for companies when they transition to a virtual work environment is that you feel like you have to be on all the time or have to be accessible all the time. So I actually shut down my schedule from 6 to 9 o'clock at night so that I give that devotion, my time and effort to my children. I do my best to make that a consistent practice. Sometimes I'm better than most. Also, having a schedule in their day. That schedule should mean having a morning routine, taking a shower, getting dressed, not being in your bathrobe. Those are consistent things that you hear. Take time to have lunch and schedule the end of your day to make sure that you have consistency within your schedule. If you just sit down at your laptop and say, I'm going to work for the next 8 hours, you're likely not going to be very successful and probably burn yourself out. Next is around your employees' well-being. So just making sure that they are taking breaks, that they are going outside and stretching their legs, that they're getting appropriate exercise, and that they're scheduling any personal tasks that may need done. So the thing you hear most traditionally is, Joe works from home and all he does is do laundry and fold laundry. I would recommend that you schedule laundry as part of your day. So if you're going to go have lunch at 12 o'clock, end a few minutes early, get the laundry on while you're having lunch, and then put it in the dryer. And by the time lunch is over and your next conference call, then so be it. There you go. You have your laundry completed. I would then also recommend that we establish a work buddy. So if you're able to do that, the reason why we recommend this is that this is, again, a way for people to socialize, to connect with people. We all have friends at work. We all have different people that we get along with better than others. So I'd encourage you to make sure that you have a virtual work buddy, especially during this time, because there's no defined period when we're going to be able to potentially go back and socialize in the traditional way we had done before. Next is to batch your work. So what I mean by that in batching your work is, again, 90 minutes of focus is about all you can give. So if you have a particular key task that needs to be done, do that first thing in the morning, batch it out in a consistent manner, and be able to stay focused on it. It may mean you don't get all of it done today, but then schedule it the next day or two to ensure that that important task gets done. And then lastly is, I'm a big believer in discipline to your to-do list. My to-do list is twofold. I have a page to page and a half to-do list that's got everything I want to get done. And then every day I establish a list between 3 to 5 things that absolutely have to get done today. And I measure myself on my ability to get those particular items completed. So next, oh, go ahead, Bridget. Yes.
I was gonna say, one of my coworkers, Christine Peters, has done a phenomenal job on the topic of unit tasking. So as a follow-up, we'll be sending out some resources that will allow you, that will share more about batch work, which I think is great if you know you're going to be entering the system, try to batch them all together, all your tech-based things at one point, maybe things that I need to communicate with people at one time. So we'll send that out as well as a follow-up.
Thank you, Bridget. So next should be culture. Oh, well, I forgot that part. So this was, there you go. So it is a joke that many times people within our firm are working sometimes all day in their robe. Just make sure that you take time to create your morning routine to make it feel like you had a start to your workday and that you have an end to it, and make sure that you're getting dressed.
And we joked about this one because I am a firm believer in wearing what's going to be comfortable, because I don't want to be distracted by, pants that dig or a shirt that's not comfortable. All those things that when you wear business casual clothes aren't necessarily your go-to items. And so I mentioned this was not, for me, I'll be honest, I'm wearing lounge pants right now, but it's okay because I have a routine in the morning that is very simple and it allows me to get to work right away without being distracted by some of the getting dressed activities. But it signifies the difference between being at home and in bed versus being in my office. So it's about that morning routine.
Thank you, Bridget. Okay, so next is culture, and then we'll finalize the webinar around managing from a distance. Oh, I'm sorry, we had one more item to go over. So make sure that you are discussing the distractions that will happen, the barking dog, the child care, the working spouse, the household chores. Obviously, we've all been consumed by the worldwide news most recently. So just realize those things are happening and don't be afraid to bring them up when time seems appropriate. Next, we should be getting into the cultural aspect of this and doing it in a virtual environment. I feel blessed that we're 5 years running as a North Coast 99 recipient, which designates companies that are a great and top workplace for top performers. But the cultural thing, this section is hard for me right now to share, to be candid with you, because in an ideal world, right, we've had time to actually plan and think this out. We would have hired, as I mentioned, for remote work, like we did with Bridget, and able to qualify people as a fit for it. We'd make sure that they align with the company culture, and that we would be able to do social gatherings, which obviously you'll see an asterisk there because we're under the confines of limited social gatherings of 10 or less people. So this is really not an ideal state to be going into this environment to maintain your culture. So it's totally different. And in this case, if you think about it, 2 weeks ago, we were worried about daylight savings time, right? We're losing an hour, and now we're faced with what is COVID-19. So in my suggestions to you as we move on to the next slide is to clearly define from a culture perspective, right? In the new normal, this is our new normal, that we want to clearly define and remind of your core values, right? Your core values are what are the lifeblood of your company. Make sure that they're consistently being portrayed throughout verbal and written communication to your employee population, because they don't have the benefit of all the signage and paraphernalia you might have displayed within your company's corporate office or the office that they're working in. I would also recommend that you document work from home standards. Those standards should be things like results are expected. We anticipate and you should be available during work hours. And we definitely would recommend over communicating. I also suggest to not overuse email. Email can become an incredible distraction. Most recently, I just shared with my team that if you need to get a hold of me, don't use an email to get a hold of me. Call me or text me or use Teams to try to connect. So don't over rely on that. You might need to develop on the fly SOPs if they don't exist today to be able to create standard operating procedures for things like onboarding or offboarding, or if you need to go into some sort of performance review scenario, or I know some of us are facing decisions around having to make layoffs, making sure that those SOPs are established. We also have to be really considerate of what this new normal is and be flexible with our people because we're all adjusting to this new setup. This is terribly new. It's maybe not perfectly planned out, and we're also then under a very unique stress because of what COVID-19 is doing in our communities. I highly encourage that you celebrate the wins, you recognize the successes that come out of your business work on a daily basis. And then lastly, this is one that I think sometimes we might avoid, especially now, but I would definitely recommend that you not. That you address issues immediately and you address them with facts and data. Let's just say you were anticipating getting a report done by 9 a.m. on a Tuesday and you don't get it until Thursday at 10, right? Let's use those facts of what expectation you set, when that report was supposed to be completed back to you, and then make sure that you hold them accountable to ensure that it was done properly. So as we go into the final step here, and then lastly, I know I mentioned this before, communicating the good and the bad. People understand that this is not good, right? Every time you turn on the news, there's a different story that can make you feel a little bit maybe more concerned. But I recommend, and I have taken the notion that I'm going to share what I know, the good and the bad. And if I don't know an answer to something, I can't predict what's going to happen tomorrow. I can't predict that COVID-19 slows tomorrow miraculously, and then we hopefully return to normal within a week or two, or we're in this for months ahead, and the vaccine that they're suggesting has been started doesn't take, and now we're dealing with this for beyond this period of time. I can't predict it. I'm just trying to do the best I can and make the right decisions that's in the best interest of our business, at the same time is incredibly conscientious and mindful of our employees that are being impacted by it. So I'll run through the last set of slides quickly because I know we're at the end of our time. So Bridget, if you can just roll through those one at a time so I can work through this. So set clear expectations. I think it's paramount that an employee understands what he or she is supposed to do every day and what the deliverables are that are supposed to get done. We have established on the calendar recurring check-in meetings with all of our employees on a consistent basis, some as frequently as twice a week, some as infrequently as once a month. I would recommend somewhere in between, maybe at the first week, 2, 3, to do it once a week. I definitely recommend looking at people in the eye through video, so you have a chance to gauge their body language. If you are able to, also get your department together to help them socialize with one another. Err on over communication, and last but not least, do not micromanage your employees. In this time, over amounts of stress, in addition to what we're already feeling, can create incredible impact to people in a negative way. So make sure you're managing things to the point of setting clear and proper expectations, checking in to make sure progress is being made, and then applauding it when it is done, or providing constructive feedback when it's not done on time.
I think one of the most important things you should do when you're setting those clear expectations, and it might seem obvious, but it becomes even more important in a virtual environment that is flexible, is when you expect something to be done. Can I have this Tuesday at 9 a.m.? And maybe you give the person, depending on what it is, the ability to say, can it be done Tuesday at 3 p.m.? You want to understand that Tuesday morning is very different for everyone, depending on when they start their day, what their flexible schedule looks like, what they have going on. But if they have a precise deadline, it's easier for them to manage to that deadline than just saying Tuesday. And when you're in an environment, you're not seeing them and maybe reminding them, or you're not able to see that they are working on something.
Yeah, so that brings us to the end of our first half of the webinar for employers. I apologize for going a couple minutes over. That's on me. And so I just want to share this with you. If anybody needs any help in trying to take your organization from a non-remote work from home environment to a virtual one, please do not hesitate to reach out to Bridget or myself. I'm John at Willory.com, John at WILLORY.com. We are a small business. We are obviously impacted by this change. We've had a number of clients that have had suspension of new job, open positions, projects put on hold, and I know there's a big push around supporting those small companies. I just would ask if you know of someone in need and need support, whether how to virtualize their workforce or may need support around their HR and payroll team as you navigate through what is our new normal for the time being, please don't hesitate to reach out. I know we also did get a number of questions. I think, Bridget, you did address them through the chat, but we will follow up with that at an appropriate time.
Yeah, and I think there is 2 really important questions, just to, I'll key them up and let John answer. The first one being, how do you onboard new hires in a remote environment, especially when maybe you weren't otherwise intending to? And then how do you conduct interviews in person? And the first thing I'll say is that the I-9 process has been loosened in some ways, that it doesn't have to be, and I'll let John clarify because I am not the expert, but the government has loosened some of those requirements. Currently in the idea of social distancing. So John, how do we onboard new employees?
Yeah, so again, luckily we have been prepared for this well in advance. So we have virtualized onboarding tools that make the process pretty simplified. It's integrated directly within our background check company. If you don't have those capabilities, my primary suggestion would be for you to virtualize all the forms that you would necessarily need to have completed, or if your HCM system provider that you may have offers that service, and you can expeditiously turn that feature functionality on. So I think best case scenario, you already had it in place and you're just kind of rinsing and repeating. Kind of in the middle, best case is you've got a technology that's available to you, just have to turn it on, and then potentially that waiting period. Worst case scenario is that you virtualize and digitize the necessary forms to be completed, have them be filled out. We actually use a system called EchoSign, which has a number of the necessary W-4, I-9 state, local forms necessary, direct deposit. So you can virtualize those forms in an electronic aspect and have them be signed electronically that way. And then to Bridget's point, there has been some softening of the, to accommodate social distancing with collecting I-9 and verifying information in that regard. So we can send that out in the communication we have. And then the other question, Bridget, I apologize. I was so focused on that one, I forgot.
That was the main question, but I think also, how do you—
Oh, the interviewing, yes. Yeah, so, okay, so if you don't have video interviewing set up through some of the traditional, like HireVue as an example, is kind of a standard, the leading standard platform for web-based interviewing, I would recommend using tools like Zoom, like GoToMeeting, like Uber. Uber Conference, just so you know, costs us, I think, $10 a month per line. So it's fairly inexpensive. And you can share that line through like setting it up as a room within your Microsoft Office platform. And so I would suggest that you use that as a means to conduct those in-person, air quote, in-person interviews in a virtual way. And then, there has to be some level of verification that that actually is that person. So that part, I don't have a perfectly great answer for right now, but definitely using web-based platforms for video conferencing as best you can, and then validating, ensuring with appropriate social distancing when you onboard staff. You obviously can bring them or meet them somewhere, obviously provide them with the paperwork to complete, let them do that at a safe distance, and then return it appropriately.
And another question is, what do you do about connectivity issues, sometimes slow internet? I know we addressed the MiFis, but do you have any other recommendations on that?
Yeah, great question. So number one, some of your employees were not planning to actually work from home. So I know, as an example, when my son is playing a video game and I'm doing something intense on my work, he'll come and tell me that he's lagging, which becomes a major issue in my son's life. And obviously we're working on that. You can then ask your employees to get an enhanced level of internet speed. So that may end up costing them more money. It may end up being a cost for you as an employer, which I know we're all trying to be conscientious of. We do also have the MiFi capabilities that are there through Sprint, Verizon, et cetera. Those we find to be probably the most reliable and able to turn on quickly when traditional Wi-Fi capabilities end up. At that point, there really isn't a ton of great other options. I mean, my other option would tell you to go to the library, but we're not doing that now. So you really are at the mercy of leveraging your phone. Your phone also is a MiFi in essence. Most phones, if they're smartphones as an example, have a hotspot attached to them. So I would go in that order, enhancing the Wi-Fi capabilities that your employees have in the home, making sure it has the right security. B, getting them a MiFi through your service provider for cell phone service. And then last but not least, leverage the hotspot feature that's on your phone, which I think is pretty easy to get to. The only thing I will tell you is your phone will get very hot by creating a hotspot, so make sure it's plugged in and being mindful of that.
And I will say my other recommendation is, and I know that not all roles and responsibilities can do this, but I always have a list and some resources that are saved onto my desktop that in case my internet goes down, or a list of things that I need to think about that maybe don't require internet. I always have that prepared in case something happens, or, again, in this current age, my daughter's on Netflix, my husband's working from home, everyone else in the neighborhood is also working from home, so things are slower. But luckily, I've been lucky not to have that internet.
All right, So let's go ahead and get into the employee's perspective of now being mobilized to work in a virtual environment from home. So Bridget, in this slide deck, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna have you kind of roll through each slide so I can see the appropriate bullets in that order. So we're working from home, and now what? Okay, so for those of you that maybe saw the first presentation, we wanted to create a little bit of levity because I think in this day and age, we need more laughs. We've been inundated with a bunch of really unique news. So again, I will self-admit, I have worked for extended periods of time in my bathrobe. I do not do video conferencing in my bathrobe. So if I ever had to do that, I would make sure to get appropriately dressed for that. That's why I recommend video, so that you force people to take that proverbial shower in the morning or get themselves ready, because it allows them to, in essence, have a break between their personal life and then starting their work day. So first and foremost, to all employees that are out there, please take a shower, brush your teeth, have breakfast. All right, so then in addition to that, as far as tips that I would suggest as it relates to making the most out of your work from home situation. So number one is that we have to accept this situation. If we try to fight this or try to not give it the care and the safety concerns that it needs, then you could really become frustrated and become unproductive in that, because you're in essence, what we had planned for and hoped to control has now changed. And so as quickly as you can accept that, the better that you can move on to being productive within your work. I would highly recommend that you establish a schedule for yourself. Routine is what you have in the morning as you go to work. Many of you, I know when I first went to virtual, I missed my morning cup of tea and listening to my favorite radio station for 10 minutes. That officially doesn't happen anymore the way that it used to. So you might want to still establish having that cup of tea, but then listening to your favorite radio station for 10 minutes in the morning, because all of them are basically available through apps and through your computer. So establish that routine. Set time boundaries for yourself. So make sure that if you want to work from 7 to 4, that you establish that work schedule and you create times for you to get out and take breaks. We are very much big proponents. We call them OOOs, or whatever the term is. Whenever I saw it the first time, I was like, what the heck is that? Feels like it's something bad. But we use Out of Office for Microsoft Outlook quite a bit. If someone has something going on personally, if they're focused on a particular project, because email inundation can become a significant distraction. I mentioned taking breaks. I mentioned also getting that daily to-do list. Again, for me, I have 2 to-do lists, one that is very long and has 30 to 40 to 50 items on it at one time. And then I have a daily to-do list that has 3 to 5 that make sure that I get those key aspects done on a daily basis. And then lastly is this concept of batching your work. So I recommend this because in the spirit of unitasking, which our Director of People Operations and one of our consultants has done extensive study and presentations on this, you're incredibly unproductive when you're trying to multitask. So I tried to fight that when my wife would tell me all the time, John, you cannot multitask. I didn't believe her, but through all the science and the things that I've read and seen and the input I've gotten from Christine, she's right. You cannot multitask. So if you have a particular project that needs to be done, focus your time and attention on that project. I would highly recommend that you turn off notifications on your email. If that already hasn't happened, turn off the little reminder that blurbs every single 6 seconds in the bottom right part of your computer. Those were turned off long ago for me, and I can't even stand the idea of even thinking of them. It's almost like a flashback. So yes, Bridget.
I think also, and it's important when you're taking those breaks, that you aren't just scrolling social media, whatever, on the internet. Your brain still thinks of that as work, even though you think it's fun and it's not work, but it's still reading. It's still that same kind of triggers. So really try to find something that isn't phone or internet or computer based, but something that maybe just switches what you're doing. Go for a walk, grab some water, etc.
Awesome. All right, as we continue through working from home, so we just wanted to create a little levity, right? That we think it's so important, and one of the reasons why I'm doing this is to provide back to the community that's given so much to me in this very unique time. So just providing some insight and sharing, hopefully some good insight and ways to think about how you can create a better work environment and culture for your employees as they go in this remote environment. So just make sure that you celebrate, you create proud moments for yourself when you have senses of accomplishment. Sometimes I give my dog a high five. Sometimes I give myself a high five. Sometimes I will even pat myself on the back, which that may sound very odd, but when you're sitting here alone every single day and you make something good or you have a success, you want to make sure that you create that prideful moment. And you might even want to call or video conference one of your colleagues and say, hey, by the way, we just landed this new client, or we just finished this project successfully, or just launched this new website. So as we carry on in the presentation, so setting up your virtual office. So as it relates to setting this up, ideally, right, and I use that word very carefully, it's a quiet space with access to a window, right? So if yours is not that, obviously you can go ahead and make that more successful for yourself. So if we could slide through those bullets, that'd be great. So in making sure that you have quiet space with access to a window, if you don't have that, let's make sure you get that occasionally throughout their day. I've seen a few of these virtual home settings that have people set up in their basement. And I did do that the first couple of years that I owned Willory. And over time, I realized that I didn't want to go down there anymore because it became, there were no windows. And although I got a ton done, I felt very, very isolated. So as I recognized that, I actually ended up taking more time and having calls outside or near windows and whatnot to create that good sunshine spirit, so to speak. Yes, Bridget.
I have a couple places in my house that I work from, and sometimes when it's a sunny day, I tend to follow the sun. Just kind of helps keep me feeling engaged and focused.
You got it. Obviously, you want to be comfortable, right? So the temperature's got to be right. Your feet can't be cold. That's a common thing that happens in my office. So I got a space heater to help me out with that. So making sure that you're comfortable. I did actually a few months ago or a few years ago invest in a stand desk, so I can sit at my chair or also stand when needed. So that gets you that kind of get up and move around concept. Again, we've mentioned this several times. Video becomes our replacement of the socialization that we had before. Again, being able to look people in the eye, not physically, obviously being able to touch them or be in the same space for a period of time. But it gives you that forum to see facial expressions, good and bad, on them. Set boundaries. Again, I talked about this as far as no work, check my phone, can't check my phone from 6 to 9 p.m. That way I created a disconnect between my work life and my personal life, and I can devote more time and attention to my children and my wife. And then this last one is really important to me. Please do not apologize for the distractions that are happening to you. I hear it all the time. Oh, I'm so sorry, that's my dog. Or I just recently had an emergency kind of client project come up on Monday, and we were talking at 6 o'clock, and the client had a baby crying in the background. And she said, I could sense that she felt bad about it. And I was like, that makes me so happy to hear a baby cry, like not cry in a good way, just having the spirit of that little person being a part of our conversation. So distractions are there, the dogs barking at the Amazon delivery, the neighbors with the cookies, the kid next door who wants to play with your son or daughter. Let's celebrate those things and don't feel bad about them. Everybody's in this same situation, having to deal with those distractions. This part can become stressful right? It can become stressful for people. So that's why I encourage you, you don't need to apologize for it. Accept it, it is what it is, and just make the most of it. If a dog becomes incessantly crazy at barking at the Amazon delivery, just ask your colleague, can you give me a minute to settle down Fido and then get back to your work. All right. So now schools are closed, and now what? I know Bridget will also have some unique experience in this regard, having her little wonderful daughter with her throughout the day. So schedules used with timers, so like literally reminding you to like stop working or make sure to go check on your son or daughter. They're going to have a unique level of independence at this time because you're having to give them the schoolwork to do, let them do that on their own, and then check in with you occasionally. Now let's hope that they don't end up, you know, coloring your walls with Crayola crayons or spending the whole time playing Xbox games. But let's schedule that time out. Be flexible. The next point, one of my friends is actually doing this. If you're able to balance that schedule with your spouse, so they actually what they're doing is one of the spouse, the wife in this particular case, is waking up super early and getting her workday started, and then her husband will start his day a tad bit later, and then she's able to accommodate the needs of the kids in the afternoon, and he's able to accommodate the kids more in the morning, and then they have their level of independence. I know we're also under the confines of not being able to have a ton of people in our house, so just be mindful of those that are coming in.
Yeah, what my husband and I are currently doing right now, and I also expect my little one to bust through the door any moment, but we are doing blocks of time and really it's important to be communicative. He'll say, I have a phone call or a meeting at this time, and I'll say I have a webinar at this time, and just making sure we're on top of it, but also setting the expectation with our daughter that if we're on the phone, try to be quiet. And then she also knows with those timers, like we'll set a 15-minute timer and it's just her for 15 minutes, no work unless something super urgent were to come up.
Thank you. The next bullet is something that we recently have been working very hard on, is preparation for meetings during quiet time, and then your ability to condense those meetings into a shorter period of time. So as much as you can be prepared for the meetings that you have on your schedule in advance of those meetings, you can be way more condensed and concise with your communication so that you are getting more done, you're being more productive in those meetings, and we're condensing them to a shorter period of time. I saw a statistic that said within the next 5 years, and this was before the COVID outbreak, 52% of employees would be working remotely. So now I know we're at a staggeringly higher, probably higher capacity of that, or closely coming to that. And then they were talking about at least 1/3 of all meetings would be canceled, which I know many of us might be doing a dance for that, because I know meetings can become very much a drain. But as long as we're condensed and we're concise and direct, it can really help you out. Prioritizing your day's responsibilities, setting expectations with your family, like a sit down with your children and your spouse about, okay, guys, here's what we're going to do. This is our new normal. Here's when mom or dad or grandma or whoever else is going to be available to support. Here's going to be your free time. These are the rules we have during your free time. I need you to check in with me, and your ability to help and support me with this is paramount, so that we can make this a success. And then lastly is, and I added this point kind of late in the game, remind yourself that this is more than likely temporary, right? Like this will not last forever. Very speculation how long we will be in this state, but it is not forever. We will figure this out. We will get through it. We will hopefully turn Corona into what is the flu, as far as a manageable, get in front of it mentality from a healthcare system perspective and our government. It's just not that right now, and we have to deal with the impact of not being prepared for something that we in essence you can debate that could have been fully prepared for weeks, months, and not even a year ago, obviously, because we didn't know about this until maybe December of last year. So anything to add, Bridget, there on schools and your experience with your daughter?
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity to really, in some ways, teach kids independence. I've been really proud of my daughter. Other times working from home have not been as successful. So really having that open dialogue of communication of this is what's happening is important. And then finding fun activities to kind of break up that this is kind of boring with something fun that you wouldn't have done otherwise.
All right. So then next, we wanted to also be cognizant. This is something that we have to deal with consistently, but now it's even more relevant because of, again, many parents, if we do have kind of joint support of your children and whatnot, are working from home together, or maybe it's independent for a mom or a dad, and then balancing those schedules. So in order for sharing your space, I think it's terribly important to communicate that to your children and the people that you're sharing it with. Obviously, you can't do that with your dog because they may not necessarily understand what you're about to say. But having done this for about 10 years or so, I know the mute button can be my friend, right? To where maybe my son will come into my office while I'm on a conference call. I haven't, like as an example today, I set expectations in my family that the office is closed from 2 to 3:30, and so far I haven't had any distractions, so I was able to circumvent any potential interruptions in that point. But communicating that, because hearing somebody yell at their children or their spouse on a conference call, which I have had happen before, feels incredibly awkward, right? And it makes me feel sheepish because I'm not that important for you to yell at your kid or your spouse that they just interrupted you while they were talking to me. So just be really, really mindful of that. Again, use visual aids to indicate when you're working. Put a sign up, mom's working, dad's working, quiet time on conference call. Go out and tell them. It's going to be new for them, like, hey, you never told me this before, but now this is a different world. So
I heard someone share online that they have literal different hats that they put on, and John will laugh because I keep joking about making him hats, but so it's like, I'm in a meeting hat, or I'm working but could be interrupted hat, or I'm working, don't interrupt me hat. Especially for younger ones, there has to be something that's very obvious that you need that space, and maybe sometimes for spouses too.
Sure. Yeah, it's a great idea. Any sort of visual clue to make sure that people know that you're working. Also, I have a quiet place. It's actually, I shouldn't say this, it's in my daughter's bedroom, that if I have to have a confidential conversation that I can go to, there's a window there. If for some reason, I've got family, hanging out in my usual workspace, I can go to that individual kind of quiet spot and people know that's where it is. I did mention this a bit before. Please consider the triggers that you have that may set you off to potentially yell at one of your kids or raise your voice at someone who interrupts you, so that you understand when that happens that you're going to get frustrated. So being mindful of that and trying to get out of the way of it. Using EQ, our emotional intelligence probably will never be tested more, at least mine hasn't, in kind of my 25-year career than it has right now. So just being incredibly mindful of the stress, strain, and change we're under, and then obviously the impact of trying to do our jobs as best we can as we navigate through what's ahead. And then also be flexible with your work schedule. And what I mean by that is maybe you might have to take your son to a doctor's appointment or something that you need to do, or you might have something happen, a school assignment needs to be done by 2 o'clock and you forgot to do it, so it's 12 o'clock. please have the courage to communicate with your employer to say, hey, I'm not able to work from 12 to 2, but I'll make up that time from 9 to 11 or 10 to 10:30 or whatever the time frame might be, so that you can make up that lost time and being flexible in your work schedule. All right, and then as far as culture, as you as the employee, the best way for you to help and maintain this from your standpoint, and it may sound cliche-ish, but I recommend that you study your company cultures just to make sure that your employer is sticking to that as you navigate through the days, weeks ahead, and that we're staying consistent with that. Understand the keys to success. We mentioned this earlier in an employer section to help them understand. We recommended to assess your employees to make sure that they have the ability to work within a autonomous schedule, that they have the discipline to make sure to get the amount of work that they need to get done, that they can balance their schedule in a way to be able to do the laundry when they need to, or take the dogs for a walk, or run a quick errand to pick up mobile groceries or whatever the case might be. And then I also highly recommend that you batch your work so that you get small segments of success done, and not assume today I'm going to do this giant project, so I'm going to get it all done today. That's really not realistic. Let's pick it off in pieces and parts. I also recommend asking questions. So if you have a concern or something's not quite working the way to help an employee or your manager, or you're struggling, ask questions like, hey, why is Joe not available from like 10 to 4? I need Joe, to help me with this critical business aspect. Do you know what's going on? Or, hey, what happens if my Wi-Fi goes out? What's my next alternative for that? So don't be afraid to ask those questions. My main encouragement to you, in addition to not only asking the question, but potentially bringing a solution back to your manager that says, hey, I heard about these MiFis that are available. I saw one, they're only $10 a month. Is that something the company would consider reimbursing me for? So that you can consider that. So ask questions. And then in maintaining culture, this is what I found has happened in my firm, right? We celebrate, and we have a bunch of furry friends, furry family members that are within our teams, in our office space. So there's a commonality between the team members that have dogs, right? That they get each other's dogs, and they understand that, their nuances and when they bark. And we've had many times during conference calls where they'll bark, or one of our colleagues' cats likes to participate in our conference calls. So the cat will come walking into the picture. So just trying to find that common bond, so that, the next time you talk to that employee, it's like, hey, what's your cat's name again? And what prompts him or her to come sitting on you? And I used to have a cat when I was 16 years old, and it reminded me of what your cat looked like. So trying to create that common bond so that you can advance the culture of your company, because your culture is about really about how your identity, the identity of what your business is, and then how your people within it should act. So creating relationships and camaraderie is terribly important. And to me, that's one of the biggest risks of this pandemic, is the distance socially for us. We've actually started something in our neighborhood, and I don't know if this would work for you, but every night at 7 o'clock, my wife starts a text chain and says, we're taking a walk. So we all go on a walk around our circle. We maintain safe distance. No. I had to have a conversation with one of the close talkers, like, hey, let's just maintain our safe distance. We're outside with good circulation. And it's a fun way to share kind of the news of the day and how everybody's feeling. And our dogs are great entertainment for us, is because they chase each other around, and they have more fun with it than we do. So making sure that you create those bonds with your staff members and your colleagues, it becomes a really important part.
In this, I've kind of said, like, I want to check in on one new coworker a day. Sometimes it's more on the interaction I'm having, but really sometimes that you do have to just be conscious and set a goal. It might seem weird, but when you are working from home, it can, you can just get in the momentum and forget that there's people sometimes outside of the work you're doing.
You got it. Thanks. Just a few more. Again, I'm actually in the process of scripting out some notes for a successful virtual work environment, potentially to draft for a white paper or a book. I also have another one on my mind. My third book, if I ever get to writing my first or second one, would be how do I blow up email? Not like physically like blow somebody up with an email, but like just eradicate it from the daily working life. Hundreds of emails, you know, it's a great form of communication in the right place. We over rely on it. So I would definitely encourage you to be careful about it because it'll be easy to do in that form of isolation. And then also, as I mentioned about asking questions, also openly discuss issues you face with your manager and other team members. Hey, I know I was told not to feel bad about my dog barking, but I feel bad when my dog barks. Do you have a recommendation? I feel like I'm not being quite as productive at this as I thought I would. What are some things I can do differently? Have you created a schedule? So just face those issues head on. Try to strategize and think in your own mind, what could I do to address the issue, and then have collaboration. If you don't want to talk to your manager necessarily about it, maybe go to a colleague who may be feeling the exact same way and came up with a strategy to be able to address and circumvent the challenge that they were facing. All right, and as far as being managed from a distance, so here's the deal. First and foremost, that's okay, Bridge. First and foremost, we have to understand that this whole thing is new for everyone. I know we are at an advantage, Willory is, because we've been doing this since day one, and we have not seen any disruption other than encouraging and working with our clients that may not have had that same environment set up. This is new for your manager. This is new for you. He or she may not know how to do this perfectly well and are used to managing by walking around or by stopping into an office or by getting a group together in a physical boardroom. So just be understanding this is new, number one. Number two, leadership teams across the country and the world are incredibly strained and stressed right now, trying to navigate through protecting their business. Right? There's a lot of companies, if you think about it, many of the restaurants that are closed in Ohio right now and across the country are owned by small business owners. And they struggle at times to make payroll just when things are working well, let alone now when you have a across the board shutdown. So leadership team and owners are facing very unique times and are having to make very difficult decisions. So just as an employee, be incredibly mindful that the next item, once we get past just kind of the understanding of what's new and being cognizant of your manager and the leadership team, is that having clear expectations is paramount. So understanding what your manager expects of you differently or the same in a virtual environment is critical, because what will happen is if you set those expectations and then they're clearly documented, that's where I would use an email that says, hey, we had a conversation today. You talked to me about doing these 4 things, and this is where you want me to focus my time. You follow up with that, and then you stick to completing those 4 main tasks, or go above and beyond if you do so desire. And then let's just say, for example, you don't hit on the bottom 2. And your manager should hold you accountable to not hitting on those bottom 2 items on that list. So having a 2-way dialogue about clear expectations, to me, is paramount in working virtually. I also recommend, in order to create that cadence, is that you put a recurring touch base with your manager and your team on your calendar. So at least once a week in this immediate term, we should be getting our team together to collaborate, as well as then a one-on-one time to connect with your direct supervisor so that you can share about the day's events. And as things are ever changing within our business and within our country and across the world, we've got to be incredibly flexible and dynamic in our ability to make decisions and pivot as needed. You also have to run toward autonomy and self-initiative. Many companies have what I'll call traditional work settings for a reason. And as a result, they might end up having to have a workforce that really relies upon working in that environment. They need that structure. They need that self-forced discipline, so to speak. They need a manager to be walking around to make sure that they stay on task to get things done. Right now, you will not likely have some of that. So I would encourage you to run toward the autonomy, go through a checklist of the things, like I said before: structured, discipline, the ability to work independently. Like if a few of those things don't fit for you as a natural tendency, then let's make sure that you self-evaluate that. And what do I need to do? To me, one of the key points is making that schedule, creating your to-do list, and batching your work. If we do those things, you can typically get a majority of the things that you're asked to do done. And then last but not least, I've been asked this question countless times, thankfully by loved ones, my wife, other colleagues and team members. How are you doing? And I ask that question of almost everyone that I speak with as we navigate through what this is today. And all I can tell you is I'm doing the best that I possibly can with the circumstances I'm in front of. I've never faced anything like this before. My Kent State education did not prepare me for this. I am trying to do the best that I can for the well-being of my firm and balancing that with the well-being of my staff. Sometimes that does not equate in a perfect scenario. It just doesn't. And that's the hard part about being in HR, about being in a leadership capacity. And so I would just ask you as an employee to do the best that you can and understand these are unique times, and this too shall pass. It's just that very unique state of the world that we just don't know exactly when. So, next slide, Bridget. I think that's it, right? There we go. All right, so just a brief reminder of the services that we provide. We're really devoted to HR technology, our human resource and payroll support, provide a number of unique business critical services and activities, as well as if you need any search support. We're seeing actually an influx in staff augmentation support, as there's a wide variety of reasons why some people can or cannot work. And then kind of ongoing support from a consultative standpoint of all things HCM, HR, and payroll.
Awesome. And we do have one large question that I kind of batched together so you guys can see so it's about managing productivity. So the first part is, how do you track hourly employees that are working from home? And then the reverse being, how do you show that you are adding value for 8 hours a day when you're working from home? So can you talk about tracking hourly employees first?
Sure. So if you are on a modern day technology for your HCM system or workforce management, I'm hopeful that that tool has if you're used to clocking in with a traditional time clock, they should have a virtual web timesheet for you to enter your time in and out on a daily basis, and then assimilating that on a weekly basis. Worst case scenario, you don't have that, then I would encourage your IT team to develop some form of an intranet site for them to allow you to enter time in that on an individual basis, so that you have to collect time, you have to memorialize that time. It's a necessary business environment requirement, and not only for getting people paid properly, but also for a regulatory perspective. Worst case scenario, you don't have either one of those. We can, again, go to paper timesheets. That would be a form that I would recommend that you create. Hopefully everybody would have a digital phone that they could take a scanned image of that and send it in, and then your payroll and HR department could assimilate those timesheets. That's going to take a tremendous amount of time, energy, and effort, and add a unique nuance to this whole situation. But you got to get the time collection. You can also potentially based upon things that are in Teams or within Microsoft Office 365. You can do timestamps through when you log on your computer and log out. I also know that the cell phone companies provide a same data collection tool that you can turn on pretty immediately to log time in and out. It's usually designed for people that are traveling from one site location to the other, but if in a short-term fix, I know those can be turned on pretty quickly. So that's on the time side. Bridget, you asked these two-fold questions, and I forget the second one, so I apologize.
No problem. And then the other is, how do you show that you are adding value in those 8 hours a day as an employee?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've done with a few members of my staff is twofold. Number one, if you have those dashboard kind of AI-based tools and you're entering information about what you accomplished, your leadership team should be able to see those on an individual level that trees up to a department level, it trees up to a company level. So if you don't have those in existence today, and again, I said don't rely upon email, but you can send a reminder recap email to your manager on I wouldn't do it every day because that feels a little bit overreached. I'd recommend it on an every other day basis. I just want to let you know over the last 24 hours, I was able to get this particular project 80% complete. I was able to do, get this customer's accounts payable down to, owing us $2,000, and kind of the list goes on. You can also use automated tools like Smartsheet to create those task lists and just kind of show progress on the things that you're getting done over a course of the days, the weeks, the months that we are facing ahead.
Yes, and I agree with John. And sometimes it's also just, again, goes back to those clear expectations. If your manager has set them, or if you've set them with your manager, you all know where you stand. And so it's less about proving value, and it's just a bit more innate. And that is everything. So if you guys do have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to John or myself with those. And I know we had some that I wanted to get back to people after the webinar, so I will make sure to do that. So thank you everyone for attending. Any last words, John?
Thank you all for taking the time. I know I hope you found it to be helpful. If there was a particular topic that you want more insight on, please again reach out to me or Bridget. And I encourage everyone to be safe and to create that appropriate social distance and be critically mindful of the recommendations that have been made by the CDC. And my last sign off on is that we will get through this together. We will look back on this as a very unique time in the history of our country and the world. And even though it feels really, really bad in spots at times right now, we will be better off for it. It is certainly something that's unique, but we will make the most out of what we're facing and get through it together.
All right, thank you everyone. Have a safe rest of your day. And again, if there's anything you need, just reach out to us. Bye.